You ever get to feeling like there's people watching you?
There's something different this time, but I can't put my fingers on it, and you can't either.
Shots fired.
Yeah, we're being watched. That's different from just being the two of us. We could stop and say, Michael, edit that out.
Yeah. Yeah, if we say something stupid tonight, we have to live with it.
We have to live with it. It's there forever. What are we going to talk about tonight?
Proverbs.
Is that okay? We talk about Proverbs. Where should we start?
Proverbs 24.
That's a good place to start. If everybody wants to go to Proverbs chapter 24, it will be on the screen as always, but it's also good to follow along in your Bibles if you would like to. And again, we've gone to 2 chapters instead of 4 because you do not want to be here all night long. And Corey will keep an eye. If anybody has something, just raise your hand and he'll let you ask your question or make your comment. Remember that these later chapters, instead of being scattered out a lot of different verses here and there, they seem to be grouped a little bit more. And the first group that I found in chapter 24 would be the first 2 verses. And they talk about the contrast between evil and good. It says, "Do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their minds devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble." How often in the world are people envious of evil people? You look at the world around us, and a lot of people get into evil things, and sadly, people are envious of them and want to be like them and want to be with them. And this is another example of we should turn and go the other way. If we see something bad developing, not something we can help take care of, but if we see something bad developing, we need to head the other way and not go rushing toward it, because all they think about is bad stuff, and they talk about trouble. Verse 8 says, "He who plans to do evil, men will call him a schemer." And here again, it's more probably descriptive that this is just the way it is. And we probably don't see how people consider the people who are planning to do evil. But people think that that's such a wonderful thing, but they don't see what people are saying behind their backs. And people realize when it's not a good thing. Verses 25 through 20 say, "Do not lie in wait, O wicked man, against the dwelling of the righteous. Do not destroy his resting place. For a righteous man falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in time of calamity. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased, and he turn away his anger from him. Do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the wicked, for there will be no future for the evil man. The lamp of the wicked will be put out." Obviously, it's not good for the wicked to lie in wait against the dwelling of the righteous. And we've seen so many times of the adulterous woman and wisdom. And the adulterous woman was lying in wait for the souls of people who come along. It says that the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumbles in times of calamity. And why would that be? Why would a righteous person rise 7 times and the wicked stumble in times of calamity?
Well, I think so often what people in the world confuse about what we view as righteousness, they think that because we claim to be righteous means we never sin, we're perfect. But that's not it at all. We know that we sin, we know that we fall short, but we always have the idea to try better the next time, to not give in to that weakness, to not give in to that error that we experience, and we try to do better. But the wicked just give into it. They fall to that wickedness and they stay there.
And they just get deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a solution. We have a way out. Not that we use that as an excuse. Well, it's okay if I make a mistake because I can always get out of it. But when we do make a mistake, we can get out of it if we truly repent. So
Right.
For us, there's a way out. For them, they just keep digging a deeper hole. It does say, "Do not let your heart be glad when your enemy stumbles." And that reminds me some of what Romans says, Romans 12. It talks about being good to those people.
Right.
And don't treat evil with evil, but return good for evil. And that's the way we should treat them. Because if God sees us acting poorly toward those people, that may have an effect on God's response to
Right.
those people. What does it mean to not fret because of evildoers?
Well, what can man do to me?
Yeah, that's true. There's nothing they can do to us. If God is for us, who's against us? And that's a whole other passage.
Right.
Another section deals with wisdom and knowledge. It says, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is strong, and a man of knowledge increases power. For by wise guidance you will wage war, and in abundance of counselors there is victory. Wisdom is too high for a fool. He does not open his mouth in the gate. And that's just an interesting analogy that by wisdom a house is built. And I don't know if that's talking so much about a physical house as it is a spiritual house. And the church is compared, of course, to a spiritual house. We are the house of God, the household of God.
Jesus talks about the wise man building a house.
Oh, we should sing that song.
Michael did that one this morning, didn't he?
Oh, he did that this morning.
Pew
Okay.
Packers, yeah.
I always love to sing that song. Okay, by wisdom a house is built, and the wise man builds his house on the rock, and the foolish man builds his house on
Sand.
the sand. And so the kind of house we want is built by wisdom and by understanding, and the rooms are filled with knowledge. And that's just a beautiful description of the church, of what the church should look like. By wise guidance you will wage war. It talks about an abundance of counselors. And that's one of the advantages of the church. Frequently see God's wisdom in creating the church and leaving us with the church. And by getting together and combining our thoughts and our ideas, we end up with probably a better idea of what we should do, what the Bible wants us to do, if we can work with each other and encourage one another. Back in those days, the gate was where the elders of the city sat, and they would carry out justice. You see that in the book of Ruth, where Boaz went to the city gate. Right. That's where the city leaders would be. And it says the fool is not going to open his mouth in the gate because there's no place for him there. He has no place among the leaders. And it says, my son, eat honey, for it is good. Yes, the honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is thus for your soul. If you find it, then there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Did you have something later on about honey, eating too much honey not being a good thing?
Yeah, that comes up in the next chapter.
And so sometimes it's used as a good thing, and sometimes it's used as, it depends on what we do with it. And but it just talks about, I think it's talking about wisdom and knowledge. Obviously, wisdom is like honey in a good way. It is sweet. And if you find it, you find wisdom, and then you're going to have a future, and you will have hope. And once again, the kind of hope we're talking about as Christians is not that I hope it rains or hope it doesn't rain. It's something that's guaranteed. It's just that we don't have it in our hands yet.
Right.
Then it talks about folly. I think just in verse 9, the devising of folly is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to men. Folly would be defined as foolishness. I think the word comes from the same word as foolishness. And a scoffer is someone who just ridicules, makes fun of things. And people don't like that. People don't like someone who just ridicules, goes around ridiculing things all the time. Verses that talk about strength. If you're slack in the day of distress, your strength is limited. Deliver those who are being taken away to death, and those who are staggering to slaughter, oh, hold them back. And it's talking about that hold them back is trying to hold them back from destruction. If you see something happening that's going to result in somebody's destruction, we need to do whatever we can to keep them from having that fate. And in a spiritual sense, there's nothing more important than keeping someone heading toward eternal condemnation.
Right.
Because the people out there are headed that way. And so, as you mentioned this morning, it is not just a suggestion that we go out and share the gospel with them. It is a commission. And we've been commissioned to hold them back from slaughter, which is what they're going to experience
And it's also, it strikes me there that it's, if you wait until you're in distress before you start trying to strengthen yourself, you've waited too long. And a lot of the Proverbs is all about thinking ahead. They even use the idea of the ant gathering in the summer so that in the winter they are able to eat. And it's the same way with our wisdom. We need to strengthen ourselves while life is good, so that in times of distress we can rely on that strength that we've already built. If we wait, then we're weak when we need the strength the most.
And I often think about athletics, especially something like the Olympics. How long does an Olympic athlete train?
Their whole life.
For a few seconds.
Yeah, their whole life.
And so,
for years.
And it is their whole life.
Yeah.
And they're, for just that one moment, and that's kind of the way it is for us. We need to prepare for when the moment arises, the time arises. There are some verses addressed to the nation or the king. It says, "My son, fear the Lord and the king. Do not associate with those who are given to change, for their calamity will rise suddenly, and who knows the ruin that comes from both of them." There is a philosophy that says change is good, and there's nothing special or sacred about change. Several years ago, Microsoft is always changing their operating systems, and they'll have two good ones, and they'll throw in a lemon. I think it's so that you will have to go back and start over again. And I don't remember which operating system it was. It was a lemon, but they came up with
naming them.
We'll start naming them. And there was a new operating system, and there's a discussion online that I ran into, and someone says, "But change is good." And somebody else wrote, "No, it's not.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of change for the sake of change is not inherently good."
Right.
But there's that philosophy that, hey, change is good. If we have something, even if it works, let's change it. And that's not what the proverb says.
Right.
If there's someone who just wants to change for the sake of change, and we have a comment, and the comment is it just makes things unstable. And that's what change can do, is create instability, if it's just for the sake of change. Now, if there's something we see needs to be changed, then we need to be willing to make that change. But change just because, you're right, it makes a very unstable situation.
It's one of the characteristics of God that He is unchanging. And if change was good, then God would change.
That's a good point. If God would change all the time.
Yeah. But change for the sake of change is not good.
No.
For us, changing when we need to change because we're headed in the wrong direction, that's good.
That's good.
Once we're headed in the right direction, there's no need for change. Yeah.
Then verse 23 talks about partiality, showing partiality. It says, "These also are sayings of the wise, to show partiality in judgment is not good." And we've noticed several times in the book of Proverbs that it says to not show partiality either way. Do not show partiality to a rich man in a dealing with a poor man, but also do not show partiality to a poor man in dealing with a rich man. It's all based on justice. And because God is a God of justice.
Right.
And He does not favor being partial either way. Not that we shouldn't be especially attuned to those who are needy and pay special attention, but in the case of showing partiality in judgment, that's not something we want to do. Verses 24 and 25 talk about righteousness. "He who says to the wicked, 'You are righteous,' peoples will curse him, nations will abhor him. But to those who rebuke the wicked will be delight, and a good blessing will come upon them." And people usually know right and wrong. They may not choose it. They may not appear to follow it. But a lot of you have had experiences, maybe at work or somewhere else, where you felt as though people were kind of ridiculing you because you're a Christian and so forth. And then when the chips are down and they really need to turn somewhere for someone that they can really look to for help, who do they turn to?
The one who knows right and wrong.
The one who's been there all along that they've been ridiculing, because they know that person is going to be able to help them out. And so when the chips are down, we're not going to look to the wicked for the answer. Woe
to those who call evil good and good evil.
Yes, exactly. And then, this is kind of a cute one. Talking about the tongue, it says, "He kisses the lips who gives a right answer." Isn't that a neat example? Giving a right answer is like a kiss on the lips.
I'm not answering that one.
You're not going to answer this one because you don't want a kiss on the lips, do you? Oh, well. In verse 28 it says, "Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. And so many times in the book of Proverbs, a false witness is condemned because they pervert justice. And this doesn't necessarily say be a false witness, but don't be a witness against your neighbor unless there's a reason to. Don't. It almost comes to the level of gossip.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go around talking about your neighbor without any reason, and don't deceive with your lips. Verse 27 talks about work. It says, prepare your work outside and make it ready for yourself in the field. Afterwards, then build your house. We need to get our work done
Mm-hmm.
and focus on the right things. And if we're a farmer, for example, our focus is going to be in the field, and that will allow us to do what we need to do in the house. If we spend all of our time in our house, then we won't be out there doing what we should be doing. It says, I passed by the field of the sluggard, and by the vineyard of the man lacking sense. And behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I reflected upon it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want like an armed man. I do have to say that the reason the grass isn't mowed over at my mother's house is because the lawnmower was kind of stuck at the back of the garage behind a whole bunch of tables that we were having a garage sale the other day, and I couldn't get to it. I got it out. It'll get mowed. It's not because I'm a slacker. It's just I couldn't get to my lawnmower. But all of you have seen this, haven't you? This type of thing. People who don't do work when it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think we're not talking about in a house situation. We're talking in a field situation. I don't think I'll get to the weeds today. I'll get to them another time, and then I won't get to them, and then they get too big, and I can't get to them. And the writer here says, I reflected on this. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Let's just take a nap. We'll get to that later on. It's okay to take a nap. You don't have to worry about taking a nap. I took a nap today. But it's just that when that's our solution to everything, just I'll take a nap instead, then we're going to end up in poverty. Verse 29 talks about taking revenge. It says, do not say, thus I shall do to him as he had done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. And there again, that makes me think of Romans chapter 12, where it talks about if your enemy or is hungry, feed him or whatever, and Jesus' admonitions to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us up to
My turn.
your turn.
All right, Proverbs chapter 25. And this one, we're just going to kind of take it straight through. It's a little different than the other chapters we've looked at, and it in many ways just lends itself to being grouped together in just a couple of different groupings. But the very first verse is one that we want to take note of. Verse 1, these also are Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, transcribed. And so these are Solomon's Proverbs, but they were collected by, or at least under the direction of King Hezekiah. And we know King Hezekiah was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good king. In fact, maybe one of the best. Solomon reigned from 968 to 928, and then Hezekiah reigned really over 200 years later, from 727 to 698. And did you put 2 Kings in there in the slides?
I did not add that to it.
Okay.
Everybody
so
go
2
to
Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 7. Give us a little insight into Hezekiah, and really there's a couple of chapters of information on Hezekiah that you can read about, beginning in 2 Kings chapter 18. But starting in verse 1, it says, now it came about in the year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did right in the sight of the Lord according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke down the sacred pillars and cut down the Asherah. He also broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the sons of Israel had burned incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. For he clung to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord had commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him. Wherever he went, he prospered. and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. Of all the things that it says about Hezekiah there, I think the part that I love the most is it says he clung to the Lord. I think that's a beautiful description of the type of man that Hezekiah was. And he wasn't perfect. There's recorded an instance or two, I think, towards the end of his life when he bragged about he kind of showed off his riches in the temple to the representatives from Babylon, I think, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't perfect, and he had some flaws, but he was a very good king. He was a very good man, just like David had his flaws, and yet he was still a man after God's own heart. But Hezekiah, it shouldn't surprise us to read that Hezekiah was concerned with collecting these wise sayings, these groups of proverbs, because he was one who was dedicated to following God. Mm-hmm. And so we have here a collection, beginning in chapter 25 here of Proverbs that Hezekiah collected. So verses 2 through 7 are a group of Proverbs concerning the king. So verses 2 through 7, it says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter. As the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the heart of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and there comes out a vessel for the smith. Take away the wicked before the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Do not claim honor in the presence of the king, and do not stand in the place of great men, for it is better that it be said to you, 'Come up here,' than for you to be placed lower in the presence of the prince whom your eyes have seen." So a couple of interesting thoughts there. It's the idea of it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. So think about the things that God knows that he didn't reveal to us. That's a whole bunch of stuff. And when we begin thinking about all the things we don't know that God does know, that glorifies God, and that lets us know that he is sovereign, that he is supreme. But then for a king, it's not honorable for a king to conceal things. A king should be concerned with justice. He should be concerned with openness and honesty, and he should make things known to the people. And it's his glory to search those matters out and to make those things revealed to the people. And then we have an admonition. Don't assume that we know the king's heart. Kings, the Bible tells us, are put in their position by God. They have the authority that is given to them by God. And when we are presumptuous before a king, bad things can happen. It was what Esther feared when she went into the king without being bidden to go in. That wasn't her place to go in before the king, but it turned out okay for her. A king's throne is established through righteousness. When you take away the dross of the silver, a beautiful vessel can be made out of what's left. When you take out the bad stuff, and the same for a king, he can take out the wickedness, take out the bad stuff, and what is left is righteousness. And that's a beautiful thing for a king to establish his throne upon. And then that last admonition there reminds me of Luke 14, where Jesus tells the story about the one who goes to the wedding feast and takes a seat of honor. And then the bridegroom comes and says, "Hey, that's not your seat. You need to go sit down there at the foot of the table because I've got somebody more important than you." And makes me think that maybe Jesus knew the Proverbs.
He might have.
When he tells stories that kind of align with what the Proverbs teach. So our next section there, Proverbs 8 through 10. Go ahead.
No. I thought maybe I had that in there, but I don't. Those are some of the things you're
okay, yeah.
I'll catch up with you.
Okay, so those are the...
Michael, edit that out.
Where were we?
We're
8 through 10. Okay, Proverbs 8 through 10. And these are Proverbs concerning neighbors. And we'll see a little bit of, I think, it goes a little deeper into one of the ones that you had in the last chapter. Verses 8 through 10, "Do not go out hastily to argue your case. Otherwise, what will you do in the end when your neighbor humiliates you? Argue your case with your neighbor and do not reveal the secret of another, or he who hears it will reproach you, and the evil report about you will not pass away." Settle things with your neighbor before they get out of hand. Don't let them get to that point. And humility is a key there. As we work with people, it's okay to admit that you're wrong when you're wrong. We shouldn't say we're wrong when we're not wrong, or give in when somebody's trying to take advantage of us. Those kind of things, but. Don't let it get to the point where if it goes to court or if it goes to the homeowners association or it goes to the legal matters that you might end up losing that. And when you lose it, you're going to be humiliated. So settle it before that happens. Verses 11 through 28, which is the rest of the chapter, really pretty well all fall under the idea of things concerning the tongue. And we've mentioned this over and over as we read through the Proverbs that the Proverbs are really concerned about the tongue. We find that in every chapter there's at least a few admonitions about how we use our tongue. And here we have just the bulk of the chapter dedicated to that idea. So we'll look just kind of a few verses at a time. Verses 11 through 13 says, like apples of gold and settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. Saying the right thing at the right time is a great gift to the hearer. And that is something that I don't have mastered yet. Do you have it mastered yet? I have known some people who had it mastered. You know who had it mastered? Lou. Lou Wall had that.
Yeah.
Lou knew how to say the right thing at the right time in a way that didn't make you mad she said it.
That's true.
And but she didn't have that when she was probably 30 years old, I'm guessing. I didn't know her then.
Maybe it takes
she
time.
was working on it.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, and you'll get there.
Eventually, in another 40 years or so, I should get it.
I'll get it mastered about the time I can't use it anymore, probably. But it is something that we just have to keep working on. And I like the illustration of like the cold of snow in the time of harvest. We take so for granted being able to go to the refrigerator and get the ice cubes out of the ice cube maker and have a cold drink anytime we want it. But think about them working in the heat of summer. And the best they had maybe was a mountain stream, which would be cool water, but not cold like we know it. And for them to be thinking about a cold drink that they could have in the winter when they probably didn't really want it, but being able to have that in the summertime when it was hot. And that would be a refreshing thing for them. Verses 14 and 15, like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of his gifts falsely. By forbearance, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue breaks the bone. And here we have the idea of humility versus arrogance. We've all known know-it-alls, or people who just claim no matter what we said, we did, they had a better story, or no matter where we went, they went someplace better, or no matter what we accomplished at work, they accomplished that in half the time with twice the better results, or something like that. And they're just, first of all, they're not true, a lot of what they're saying, because they're boasting about things that they haven't accomplished. But second of all, it's just no fun to talk to them. And what do you think that means? A soft tongue breaks the bone.
Because that's the most effective way to get it across.
Yeah.
If we just yell and scream at somebody, it has no impact.
And it even goes to what I think we'll get to here in a minute about the idea of heaping coals of fire. If we jump up and down and scream and yell in the face of somebody who has wronged us, then all we do is justify their anger at us or justify what they've said to us. But if we react in a humble way and in a calm way, then that can do more to dismantle their argument against us than jumping up and down and yelling at them. Verses 16 and 17, have you found honey? Eat only what you need, that you not have it in excess and vomit it. Let your foot rarely be in your neighbor's house, or he will become weary of you and hate you. And this is one of those where we have kind of an A-B thing going on here where, this really isn't about honey. It's really about the second verse. The illustration is, I think most of us have probably done that before, where we have something we really like and we eat so much of it that it makes us sick. Kids are notorious for that around Halloween time.
But not adults.
But, well, hopefully you've learned by the time you're an adult not to do it. Maybe. But, you just eat so much that you don't enjoy it, that it makes you sick. The point here is, let your foot rarely be in your neighbor's house. What's the old saying? Fish
and guests are the same after 3 days.
They stink after 3 days?
Yeah.
So don't wear out your welcome. And the fact that my name is Fish, I don't like that one very much.
That's not a good example.
So don't wear out your welcome. Too much of a good thing. Understand boundaries. All right, verses 18 through 20 here. Like a club and a sword and a sharp arrow is a man who bears false witness against his neighbor. Like a bad tooth and an unsteady foot is confidence in a faithless man in time of trouble. Like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar on soda, is he who sings songs to a troubled heart. The tongue can be a tool of great destruction.
Yes.
When it's used falsely, when it's used maliciously, when it's used in ways that don't fit the situation. That last verse there, like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar on soda, is he who sings a song to a troubled heart. You know, I understand the idea of seeing somebody who's suffering or down in the dumps or whatever, and doing what you can to cheer them up. But, you know, when you've lost a loved one perhaps, or you're dealing with great tragedy in your family, or whatever the case may be, it's not the time to go to somebody and just start telling them how beautiful life is and how much they'll appreciate this when they look back on it and things like that. You just got to know what to say and when to say it. And there's a time for it and there's a time not for it. So I like that. That one's so very practical, I think. Verses 21 through 24, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. And there's that passage
That sounds familiar.
talked about a couple of times already, Romans chapter 12. It's almost like Paul had read Proverbs.
Jesus read it?
Paul
read it?
I wonder if anyone else has read it.
Surely not.
All right. But it continues on. The north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue an angry countenance. It is better to live in a corner of the roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman.
That's where wisdom causes us to say it's not talking about women.
It's not talking about women. You know, it doesn't mean that only women can suffer from that ailment.
Okay. Just want to make that clear.
You well spoken. But you know, the underlying idea here is that our tongues have the power to destroy relationships. The tongue is a burning fire, full of restless evil. Isn't that what James said?
You think James read it?
I think James might have read Proverbs as well.
Yeah.
And our tongues can heal or they can destroy. And once you have employed your tongue to destroy a relationship, that destruction can happen so much faster than the rebuilding of that relationship afterward. James compares it to a fire. And you think about a forest fire that burns through the forest and it completely wipes out a forest. And then how long is it going to be before that forest is back? It's going to be 50, 60, 70 years before those trees are all grown back and it looks the same as it did before that one day of fire went through. And so our tongues can do that to a relationship, where a relationship that has existed for decades can be torn down in a day. And then it can almost sometimes never be rebuilt to the same level it was before. So we really have to focus on how powerful our tongues are. Verse 25, another good illustration here. Like cold water to a weary soul, so is good news from a distant land. There's that illustration of cold water again, something that we take for granted, but they had, they really appreciated. Makes me think of Romans 10:15, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring glad tidings of good things. You know, it's just a beautiful picture to think about giving good news to somebody. Verse 26, like a trampled spring and a polluted well is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked. So we have kind of the flip side of that. It's a cool drink on a hot day to bring good news, but it's like a polluted spring or a polluted well when a righteous man gives way before the wicked. What does that mean? Give way before the wicked.
He gives into it. He
Yields to it,
He follows the wicked.
Yeah, we have the truth. We have righteousness on our side, and when we give in to the argument of the wicked, and we follow after what they're preaching, after what they're broadcasting, that's disgusting. That's horrible. And then the idea there, all it takes for evil men to succeed is for good men to do nothing. Was that Bonhoeffer that said that?
No, it was. I would have known that.
You would have known if I hadn't said Bonhoeffer?
There's some discussion about it, but Edmund Burke.
Edmund Burke,
is
okay.
the earliest one that we have record of.
Okay. Maybe Bonhoeffer quoted him.
Bonhoeffer,
you probably knew that statement.
JFK quoted him.
Okay.
And so that may be the most recent one, but Bonhoeffer probably said the same thing.
All right. So, but you know, we have righteousness on our side, and if we yield to the wicked, what a disappointment that is in our lives and before God as well. Verses 27 and 28, then, it is not good to eat much honey, nor is it glory to search out one's own glory. Like a city that is broken into and without walls is a man who has no control over his spirit. There's that honey idea again.
3 times.
So, but honey is not the point. It's the illustration to make the point. It's not good to glorify oneself. And again, Jesus in John 5:31, if I alone bear witness of myself, my testimony is not true. I think Jesus had read the Proverbs. So it's not glory to search out one's own glory. And so in John chapter 5, Jesus points to the testimony of several others. God, the Father, John the Baptist, the miracles that he was performing. I can't remember if there were others or not, but at least several other things to point to that his testimony being true, because he didn't have to bear testimony to himself. So there you have it. Proverbs chapter 25.
Do we have any questions?
We always have questions.
We always have questions. The first one is, what does the house, I should have said built on wisdom and understanding, look like?
Typo.
It's a typo.
Can you fix that, Michael?
Before it goes out over the internet, would you please fix that to built on wisdom and understanding? That goes back to one of our earlier passages there about what that looks like, a house. Now, the house is in quotation marks because we're not talking about a structure.
Right.
We're talking about something much more significant than that. What happens to a person who prefers laziness over work? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands for rest.
Remember my dad using that verse on me numerous times in my youth.
It was familiar to you?
I thought it was his favorite proverb because he was always saying it to me.
I wonder why. All right, what else?
What must happen in order for evil to triumph?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
What has to happen in order for evil to triumph?
What relationship should we have with our neighbors? And then how are proper words described?
And there are some beautiful descriptions of that.
Yeah.
And we haven't always done this in our Sunday night discussion, but we do, in this kind of situation, always want to offer an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, the gospel's always open, and we always want to give people an opportunity to respond to the gospel. And so if someone is, even someone who's watching, if they would like to learn more about what their Bible says about their situation, their relationship, maybe something that's said in the book of Proverbs, make them stop to think about seeking wisdom and wanting to find out what their Bible has to say about that. We would sure be glad to sit down and study with them. And there are some who may have done that and come to the conclusion that the next step is to put Jesus on in baptism, and that we can do that easily.
Very easily.
It's not something you put off. It's not something we do every quarter, every 6 months, every year when we get enough people, because it's essential for our salvation. Mm-hmm. And so it's something that we do now. And then, of course, if there's anything we can do to help somebody who may be struggling with some of these things or any of these things, to pray with them or pray for them, to encourage them in any way, then we want to make that opportunity available to the people here. And then people who are watching, just contact us. Let us know if there's something we can do mm-hmm. to encourage you. And so we're going to sing that song here in just a second. And then after that, we're also going to have an opportunity for those who didn't get a chance to take the Lord's Supper to do that. So, George, if you'll sing that invitation song.